Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with an old friend, Richard Crifasi, and right now he is a tool and safety consultant, but really kind of wrapping up his career, being part of an industrial supplier and now an electrical supplier, and really has held different roles throughout his career, as you'll hear through the episode. Richard's one of these guys that I would run into at conferences and just such a pleasure to run into, and always had some fun idea he was working on. And it's interesting to see, where people start out and where that path takes them. We had a great conversation about, starting with a small privately held entity, then getting involved with a larger entity that went public and then went private again. And then really wrapping up his career working with a large family business again. And so, this cyclical turn, but all the experience and the ideas that he picked up along the way and how to take those to a new level and really in a new environment, people who, had not been exposed to what he had done over his career. And now he's, getting to play again, getting to experiment and start new things. And, it's a pleasure, hearing the story in its entirety. And of course, I knew bits and pieces as being, friends and seeing them at different entities and different conferences. But, just listening to the whole story and how it came about, truly a pleasure. So I enjoyed the conversation with Richard, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution. And these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Economy doesn't mean compromise. This company is on the cutting edge of distribution-friendly applications like VMI on mobile devices, mobile signature capture, mobile CRM, warehouse management software, and e-commerce development. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Well, hey, Richard, fantastic to see you as always. Welcome to Distribution Talk. Thanks for taking the time to be with me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a surprise and it's an honor. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. My pleasure. So, gosh, you and I go back a long way. So, but rather than getting into that at this point, tell me a little bit about your background. Maybe, starting, how did you get into the distribution world and what drug you into this crazy world you've been in for a while?
Okay, so we'll go back after college in New York. I did some travel down in Mexico and I really liked it. Decided I wanted to continue on into graduate school. I investigated schools in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and found that I liked the University of New Mexico for what I was looking for. So I ended up at graduate school down in New Mexico. I was working for a paint store just part-time and while I was going to school full-time. And then I met a lady who is now my wife and kind of high maintenance. So I had to get a full-time job.
Okay.
So doing what everybody did at that point, I got out the local newspaper.
Yeah.
And there was an ad for Frank's Supply. So I didn't know if they sold hot dogs or whatever.
Right.
So I went in with my three-piece suit, and actually, probably the last time I had a three-piece suit, went in and realized I'm not dressed for the occasion.
Right.
But I met the owner's son, and we just hit it off. And what he liked about my resume is that I had previous experience in selling Hoover vacuum cleaners.
Okay.
And so the education was okay, but so I have a business degree. I'm almost finished with a master's degree, but I sold vacuum cleaners. So if I could do that, I could probably sell power tools.
Sure. Sure.
So we got it together and I started there. I enjoyed it. And in short order, I noticed that these outside salesmen were not only driving company vehicles, but they were reputed to be getting good money, at least at that time.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, self, I can do this job. I can do what they're doing. I can probably do it better. So anyway, I worked with the inside sales in a rental department for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
A position came open in the Farmington branch, which is up in the Four Corners area.
Yeah.
And the only condition I had was my wife needed to finish school, and there wasn't a 4-year college there, but there was in Durango, Colorado. So we were forced to live in Durango, Colorado for about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I covered the whole Four Corners area, which was dominated by an industrial environment. Certainly we sold contracted tools and commercial projects, but I realized that selling to a couple of power plants and to the coal patch and the gas fields, there was an opportunity. And what I found in very short order, I was selling a heck of a lot more than any of the other salesmen because I was selling to a different community. I was selling to that industrial community.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of led to some recognition in the company. I got a little sidetracked. I got annoyed because they hired someone and split up my accounts. So I ended up working for a manufacturer's rep for 2 years. I sold Knack, WeatherGuard, Bauer ladders.
Sure. Sure. So you had a little resentment job, is what you're telling me.
Yeah. And they wanted me back because the sales that I had developed, my replacement didn't quite get there. So came back to Frank's up in the Four Corners, brought back another dimension that I didn't have before. And in short order, they invited me down to Albuquerque to be the general manager. And that worked out great. Coming into Albuquerque, I had some nice relationships with some people. For example, Bauer, Norm Miller, he recommended to George in Evergreen to reach out to Frank Supply and try to recruit us. And so I spoke to him and I told him at the time, if you bring on Black & Decker, this makes it a simple decision.
Sure.
So about 2 months later, he called, he said, we brought on Black & Decker. So we signed up to both branches and we were in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the trigger to a tremendous education. So while I was learning quite a bit at Frank's in a new position, learning about financials and so forth, I started to attend the meetings, participated in some of the activities, and realized that I can learn a heck of a lot more by associating with some of these owners than I can trying to teach myself.
And that's the Evergreen Marketing Group, right? You know, the group meetings and
Correct.
stuff like that. Okay. Gotcha.
So I rolled on the board with Stu Southard, and Bob Munson was still on. So we still had one of the founders.
Sure. Yeah.
At that point, the board was no longer dominated by the founders, and we needed someone to run the company. Before that, Joe Drocek did a good job, but he was directed by the founders on what he should do.
Yep.
So he wasn't really allowed to run the company. He just did what he was told. So we went out and we hired Kevin Higginbotham.
That was a great hire.
Oh, it was awesome. So that in itself was a major breakthrough. But sitting and talking with the likes of Doug Jordan and Rick Thomas, just tremendous. You know, it was the experience was great. We got involved with a lot of training, with business forums, and my professional growth just soared. So I went from, a nice, base. I've bachelor's degree, master's degree, and now I'm getting a firsthand look at distribution and learning it from a lot of different perspectives from these people. I was able to participate in advisory councils with Black and Decker. I was part of the team that redesigned it. I can show you. Redesigned the logo at the time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. There's the old Black & Decker industrial logo. Sure.
Yeah, and that lasted probably about 6 months when DeWalt really blew them out.
Right.
And so that changed everything. But, meeting with those people and working with them,
Yeah.
once again, it was just a great experience.
Well, one thing, Richard, I mean, by getting involved with that organization, you really got that face-to-face interaction with some of these people that some of the manufacturers that, yes, at Frank Supply, you sold these products,
Yeah.
but you rarely had face-to-face interactions with senior leadership of these large entities at this time. If you think about Bauer Ladder or Black and or DeWalt, for that matter, and any of the bigger kids on the block. I mean, that just wasn't something that happened as an independent distributor out of Albuquerque for guys. That's
right.
It just wasn't going to happen. You might see a manufacturer's rep, or you might see a territory manager every once in a while, but not the senior leadership where you can not only learn a lot, but you had that voice. You could actually have input.
No question about it. And at the time, I had participated for about 4 years on the Proto Advisory Council. Doug Smith was on that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the founders of Industrial Distribution Group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Him with Charlie Lingenfelter really triggered that IDG movement. They brought in 9 companies and did a roll-up, but I knew Doug from the Stanley Proto Advisory Council. I knew Charlie Lingenfelter from Evergreen.
Yeah.
And so I got recruited to join them over here in Charlotte because Charlie was taking a bigger role in IDG, which was becoming a very big company.
Sure.
And he needed someone for Ensco Supply. My name came up. Bill Grebe had recommended me, and Frank Isaacs, he reached out to some of the guys and said, do you know of anybody? And my name came up. So next thing you know, he's flying us into to Charlotte to visit Ensco Supply Industrial Distribution, and that's how we ended up here.
So before we jump into IDG and the Ensco world and whatnot, I did have a question about, going back to Frank's for a moment here. So when you were still there, did Frank's jump into the government contract world?
Yes.
Because I know that was, that's a big part of it. I interviewed Rick, Lamb a little while back, and we talked a lot about government contracting and things, which is a very foreign world to a lot of people. I mean, that's a very strange world. But so that was something that you were involved with when that started up?
Absolutely. That was huge for us. So at the time we were there, we were calling on Los Alamos Labs because they had a lot of construction going on. One of our key competitors in Albuquerque was New Mexico Steel. They sold welding supplies and so forth. When Air Gas acquired them, we were able to pick up several of their people, and they communicated to us, hey, there's an opportunity up here that you need to look at. So along with Rick Lamb and myself, we started to jump into this and look at it. Initially, we were getting resistance from Frank's. Hey, we call on contractors.
Right.
And we said, please be patient with this. Let's take a look and see what this looks like. And they coached us, told us what we needed to do. We leveraged the female-owned. After Danny passed the business on to his daughter, Melissa, then we had that dimension, which was very attractive to the labs. And we got involved with Los Alamos. Mm-hmm. We put a store up there, and I stole the idea of building racking out of strut.
Oh, yeah.
I had visited a place in Portland that did that.
I know a little bit about that. Yes. Yeah.
So we built our displays and racking out of strut in Los Alamos, and we nailed it. We nailed it big time.
Oh, that's great.
Rick Lamb unquestionably has his signature all over that. He put in the academics and everything you needed to win that, and we won that contract. By getting that contract, several years later, we got the Sandia Labs contract out at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. So, yeah, big part. That was a nice dimension.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was curious, kind of when that came about in the
Yep.
Franks history. So you get recruited over to Charlotte. Yep. You once again move across the country, sort of, and you're looking at this IDG. Can you explain a little bit about what IDG was? Because this is a very foreign concept when it started, at least to people like myself from the West Coast.
Okay, so IDG there were a number of people that were on the Stanley Proto Council. So you had Continental McLaughlin, Knox Supply, several from around the country. And those guys happened to be on there. And Doug Smith started to talk to them about how we going to compete with Grainger. And he said, why don't we talk about doing a roll-up? Let's see what that might look like. So that's exactly what they did. Gotcha. In 1997, 9 companies sat down together and decided to do a roll-up. What they originally did was they were going to keep the companies with the local presence, with the local names, but they were going to roll it together, create a public company on the stock exchange, and try to mimic the bigness of Grainger so they can compete with them. And while the intention was good, well, let me go one step further. In the first 2 years, from 97 to 99, they brought on another 22 companies, mostly small companies from around the country.
Wow.
So immediately, IDG had a national footprint. But with a little consolidation, there was still 13 presidents. There was still 13 sales managers, 13 human resource managers.
Yeah.
They had that. They had the cost of being on the stock exchange.
Right.
And then the Sarbanes-Oxley issues started to arise. They weren't making money because of the overhead. They knew it had to be done, and they needed to consolidate. And that was the first step toward creating just an IDG and breaking down all the names. So the core of IDG here, there was Dixie Industrial, Boring Smith and Ensco Supply. Well, the industrial piece was Dixie Industrial. That became IDG along with the other companies around the country. So in that period, by 99, we had consolidated down, and we were continuing to make it smaller. We wanted to end up with maybe 4 regions. But even with that, we were challenged to the bottom line because we were being siphoned off by costs that probably weren't necessary. But in the meantime, IDG won the Ingersoll Rand contract, which they still have today. That was $100 million at the time. And they won that, and they've kept it now for 12 years, which is amazing. But in doing so, they realized that they were a large industrial distribution company. And their MRO business was not that good. They didn't invest in the online. They weren't competing with the Tool Crib and with the Tool Ups and so forth. They were doing integrated supply, and they were masterful. So that Luther King Capital Management came in and bought IDG, moving them from a public company to a private equity. Interesting dynamics. The board changed. It wasn't a board made up of the good old guys from different distributors. All of a sudden, there was a professional board with financial people behind pushing to the numbers. But you didn't have that $1 million cost for the stock exchange, $1 million cost for Sarbanes-Oxley. So there was another $2 million that was hitting the bottom line that wasn't before. So that went really well. Made sense. They added Merck and a couple of other major companies to their integrated supply list. And became very attractive. Enough where Sonepar looked at them and came in and made an offer they couldn't refuse.
And Sonepar it's primarily electrical though, right? I mean, it's
Correct.
primarily an electrical. So, I mean, it was a little bit of a funny fit, I'm curious how Sonepar said, hey, I like this industrial thing. Maybe I'll try this. It's not really what I do, but.
Well, here's the fit. So several years before, they purchased Hagemeyer. Hagemeyer was a combination of industrial and electric.
Okay.
So they had the electric business. So Tri-State Electric in Maryland was interested in getting that Hagemeyer electric business. Well, Sonepar bought them thinking, well, let's try to get a presence in the industrial market as well. So they went with the Hagemeyer. And so when they saw IDG had some similarities. They had the integrated supply. They had a similar footprint, but they complemented. They had different big customers. So they thought, we're going to buy IDG. We're going to immediately integrate them with Hagemeyer, which they did, making us all of a sudden the biggest integrated supplier in the country. And that's really how we came together. They found pretty soon that the industrial and the electrical made no sense. It was two different things.
Yes.
And so they decided, let's separate the industrial and the construction. And they made the decision to have ENSCO Supply go with the construction, the electrical. So that's what we did. So that's when we left IDG and became part of Capital Electric. Well, even then, the feeling was, don't mess with ENSCO. They're profitable. Just leave them alone. And I'm telling them, listen, if we don't grow, we're going to die. And their interest at IDG was industrial. Their interest at Capital was electric. And they just wanted to leave us alone. And I said, that's not the right thing. We have really three choices. You could leave us alone. We're going to lose our people because we don't have the growth focus. You can sell us or integrate us. And they took a good hard look at that and decided, let's integrate. We want to keep it. We're not into selling off businesses, especially profitable businesses. So that's when we reevaluated. We came together. We put a team together, a plan together. And I would say the original concept was mine. Let's get this big a footprint. But I also recognized that this was a design build. And so we had people like Tony Essie and Eric Alexander participate in this. And that vision started to modify to the better. So what we became, and it was at the beginning of 2022, our name changed from ENSCO Supply to Capital Electric TFS, Tools, Fastener, and Safety.
Gotcha.
So we had this core business of ENSCO with the expertise on the inside. We took our field salesmen and put them randomly into other places. So we have specialists in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Charleston, all feeding into what we refer to as the TFS Solution Center, which is ENSCO Supply in Charlotte. So we have inbound requests for quote and whatever coming in to a team that knows what they're doing. So instead of sending a tool request to an electric guy at a counter in Augusta, Georgia, it's coming into us. And we were very competitive. We're buying right. We have $1.5 billion company behind us. And so we've built up this business and it's grown like wildfire. And so that's where we're heading today. And we're just developing that further. And there's really nothing stopping us. It's been an amazing ride. In some respects, I'm going to miss it. Now I am, Right now I'm working about 2.5 days a week. So I'll come in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And to make up for that, I'll leave early on
Yeah,
Monday,
yeah, yeah,
Wednesday, and
yeah,
Friday. But I'm enjoying the heck out of this. And we're just seeing this overwhelming success, which is getting a lot of attention at Sonopar. So
yeah,
Sonopar has these little pockets, other opcos, that's what
yeah,
they refer to their businesses as. They have tool and safety specialists that are going out there. But these poor guys, they have to go out there, get an opportunity, come in, quote it, and expedite it and go back. Our guys don't have to do that. They just have to go out. The electrical salesman with honest ignorance just says, hey, if you have this, send it to this email or call this number. They can help you. They're not cutting me out of it, but they know this stuff better than me. And it's working. So Sonopar is taking a good look at what we're doing. And if it makes sense, they're going to duplicate it. And I'm going to add in one thing. This is certainly not official. I can see a day similar to the IDG where
yeah.
today we have 14 opcos where
Hmm.
that'll eventually become regionalized sonopars, east, central, west,
Sure.
and leverage that even bigger. I believe their sales last year were in North America were 14 billion. Worldwide, it was 33 billion. This is a family-owned business.
Heck of a family right there.
Which
Yeah.
another interesting point. And when they first acquired us, the chairperson came in and she spoke to us and she made it real clear about the rules for the family members. They don't
Interesting.
automatically have a position because of their name. They automatically get an interview for any job that may be available. The pay scale is for that job. There's nothing extra. But at this point, they have a couple of hundred family members in training at different places. But if they don't cut it, they're gone.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you don't get to be a family entity that does 33 billion by rampant nepotism. It just doesn't work
Right.
well. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fascinating business.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
becoming something that I know rental companies have tried to add
yeah.
tools and safety. You need the right software, you need the right people. Their focus was big iron. Same thing with plumbing. Ferguson has tried this and dabbled
Hmm.
with it. I'm sure other electricals. Well, we're doing it and it's starting to make sense. And we're growing the business
Yeah.
and it's fun.
Well, I think, Richard, a couple things kind of come to mind here. Yes, I think there's greater synergy with an electrical house and let's say that traditional staff to house or industrial house you and I, spent most of our lives around. Much greater synergy between that. And, I think that, yes, I can kind of see that vision that you're seeing right now of this, rolling out to all the different operating companies where, either they feed to a central Charlotte or they have regional TFS,
Solution centers.
yeah,
Yep.
solution centers, right, around the company or the country. And I've had a lot of, I've worked with a lot of different Sonopar operating companies, and frankly, really enjoyed working with them. Because I think there is that family mentality that permeates those, even though they're this massive juggernaut. There still has a different vibe to them, a different feeling. In a previous conversation, you and I talked about some of the people that I knew from Capital, and really enjoyed working with them.
Yeah.
Enjoyed working with them, and gosh, it feels like the companies that I grew up in. And you
Yeah.
were around, and so it feels different. But one thing I wanted to touch on, Ensco, the Ensco world is about 3 locations, and all of a sudden now there's 70 Capital locations, and as you said, you've got some people you've moved around, field people. But if you could just, what was the transition like, or I guess what was the sell job like, to the 70 branch managers or the folks in there?
It's still underway. So legitimately, there's probably about 10 to 12 locations that have embraced it, that are bringing in inventory, that are allowing our specialists complete access to their key customers. promoting us and working. There's still a lot that are reluctant to, share with us. Not sure whether, who is this guy?
Who's
How
this
can we
guy?
trust him?
Right. Right.
Well, picture you might have an electrical salesman. He has 10 million in sales and he might have 5 million in sales to a particular customer. He doesn't want to take the chance of some guy that's selling him power tools screw up and not deliver a power tool and put his wire, switchgear, lighting business in jeopardy. Well, we're proving ourselves. What we're doing now is when we get an opportunity, instead of taking 2 days to get back to them, we're trying to get back to them in, any reasonable quote, half hour to 2 or 3 hours. So they've never experienced that before. So they're starting to give that. We don't take their commissions. They keep their commissions. We're specialists. We get paid growth on the TFS business. We have that. So little by little, we're becoming more embraced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we are seeking new customers, but if we didn't open a single customer, but we're able to penetrate these mega customers that Capital has, there's no stopping us.
Right.
These are very, very big customers.
I think it's fun to see you keep saying us, even though theoretically, you're down to 2.5 days a week. I mean, this is still in your blood, man. This is, I can see your excitement and your,
Yep.
Yeah, you're asking for 10 extra years, to keep going on this thing. And yeah. No, it's a fun journey, and it's really been interesting though. The different twists and turns, from the newspaper ad at Frank's Supply to
Yep.
all the way through. I think a lot of folks have never really experienced that world. I mean, you really, you became a public entity, then a private equity entity, and now into a global family business. Interesting ride. Very interesting ride.
And the people I've had as mentors along the way. How well do you know Charlie Lingenfelter?
Charlie was kind of removing himself from Evergreen when I kind of came on the scene and came on the board. I've met him several times. I knew of it. And then I had an opportunity to visit you and Charlotte one time, but that was my exposure. Yeah.
Well, he was big on activity-based costing.
Oh,
we
good.
spent a lot of time on that. He was big on pricing metrics and, how to raise profitability. So I picked up some really strong things with him. Some of these people that I mentioned, fantastic that, what they were able to share. And that's the professional development that I got by working with these people. We're sitting down and showing them. We didn't spend too much on the safety, but I brought in Chad Lingerfeld to help us with that. He was our safety manager for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We took safety from about 8% of our business to 60% of our business. I mean, we were focused, and we still are. We still have a very strong safety element, probably being more directed to electrical opportunities, but that's in our blood too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of the staff-related industrial houses, well, industrial was kind of always had a safety bent to it. But the construction folks, it took them a long time to kind of add that piece. I mean, they dabbled, but really, I know some friends, in that business that the percentage of business that has gone safety and now there's safety specialists on staff and all of that. Leaps and bounds, really growing dramatically until you kind of look at it and you're like, man, this is blending and it doesn't really look the same as it used to, but it's an interesting world for sure.
Well, you just take, for example, a pair of gloves. A pair of gloves have a life expectancy of 2 weeks, a margin of 30, 40%, depending on what it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the company has to provide it. By law, they have to provide it to their workers. Even if they leave it home, they still have to pick out a pair of gloves. And it's usually a new pair of gloves. So, I mean, it's a nice business.
It is. It is, especially if you have existing relationships.
Yeah.
It just is a natural add-on. I mean, I think that's the beautiful part about that. So,
Yeah.
no, the safety world's been great. I've watched actually
Yeah.
companies change their name to, X Supply and Safety. They just add
Yep.
the and
Yep.
safety because they want in that game so desperately. So, well, good. I think that one of the things that you had alluded to and touched on, and you've touched on a couple of times, is that the board. At
Yep.
the time, it was Evergreen Marketing Group. Today, it's Evergreen Supply Network. But the board of directors
Yep.
and just that professional and the involvement with other folks that were kind of doing the same thing you were, that's just invaluable. I mean, absolutely invaluable.
Well, when I first realized the impact of hand protection gloves, that was Stu Southern, Care Supply.
Yeah. Care Supply. Yeah, sure.
Oh, he was nailing it. And that was before he sold the company, came back in, started a safety business, sold that, and then started again.
Oh, yeah. He's the ultimate recycler. I
Oh,
mean, he has done very well with that.
he knew safety. It made total sense. And I watched that and said, this is a no-brainer. I got to do this. You had, like Doug Jordan with slings and business like that. I mean, these guys were just full of imagination and just great guys. Great
Yeah.
guys that if you ask them, you call and say, hey, I've got a situation here. How would you do this? Or I have a commission program I'm putting together. Let me bounce something off. And we would end up with them saying, yep, I think I'm going to change mine. We're going to move this around. I like the way that looks. And so we put in, incentives that are driving strategic objectives, and it works for everybody.
So looking back at that, and I'm a huge proponent of people getting involved with their industry,
Yep.
outside of their own company, but into, these, whether it is a group or marketing group or the trade association. I'm a huge advocate
Yep.
of getting involved. In fact, also of local community contractor groups, things like that. I think there's another place for involvement. But I guess thinking back to young people entering this business, what should we tell them? What piece of advice could we give them to really have this long, very fruitful career that you've enjoyed? I mean, what do we want to tell them?
Well, when I speak to new people coming into the business, there's great opportunity for making money if you want to go to a manufacturer and you work yourself up. If you want to really make some big money here, it would be nice to get into ownership. But what we're giving the people that come into our business, you're going to get a good pay. You're going to be working pretty much Monday through Friday. You're going to have weekends. And if you care about your family and want to spend time with your kids, you can't beat this. You're going to be away from home 3 or 4 times a year for training. But other than that, you're going to be at the baseball games. You're going to be at the soccer games. And you just have to decide, what's more important in your life. I made that decision a long time ago at Frank. So I had 2 boys and I was starting to play golf. And if I wanted to get good, I was going to have to play golf.
Yes.
I got my kids into judo because I had been into judo for years.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, we were all into judo, practicing judo, traveling to tournaments. Rick Lamb and his son and his family would travel with us. We were a judo, like you have a soccer family. We were a judo
and basketball families, I get it. Oh, trust me, I'm deep in there. Yes.
So that's what distribution gives you. It gives you a legitimate family life. Again, if you want to make some mega bucks, you probably have to get into some kind of an ownership capacity. But the management people and the sales people in the distribution business live a good life. And they spend time with their family. And I think that's for the people that want to enjoy the family, this is hard to beat. It really is.
Oh, that's great advice, Richard. I mean, absolutely. You've got, tremendous balance in this business. You aren't a road warrior. I mean, you don't have to be a road warrior. I mean, there are so many opportunities. And I like to tell people that you can also be given a tremendous amount of responsibility at a very young age, that you can, come into a very big decision-making capacity, by 25, so it's really, it's one of those hidden gems. So anyway, I wanted to pick your brain about that one. Kind of had to throw you a curveball there at the end of the session. But anyway, man, so great to hear your story, and I knew many parts of it, but it was great to hear the whole thing, and such a pleasure to speak with you again.
Well, this was fun. It's nice recalling some of those things I haven't thought about for a while, too.
You bet. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on and sharing with us a little bit of the story, and good luck with the other things going on, and hopefully that 2 to 3 days a week will keep you going.
We'll see how long. I really enjoyed that time off.
Yeah, I get you. All right, my man. Again, hey, thanks again for doing this. I truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.